In this video, we will demonstrate how to use GitOps with Argo CD to deploy an app to different namespaces in an OpenShift cluster, where the IBM Cloud-Native Toolkit has been installed. In the Deploying an App with Tecton and IGC video, we deployed our application to a development namespace. In this video, we will configure Argo CD and use GitOps repo to deploy the application to testing and staging namespaces. We will follow along with the process documented on the CD with Argo CD page in the Cloud-Native Toolkit Developer Guide. As stated here, Argo CD is a declarative GitOps continuous delivery tool for Kubernetes. What that means is you define the desired state of your application deployment in a Git repo, and Argo CD will compare the current state with the desired state and update the deployment to keep them in sync. Argo CD defines an application as a deployable unit and a project as a collection of applications that make up a solution. We will create a project that has a single application to be deployed. First, we will create a GitOps repo using the Argo CD starter kit. Click on the link and it generates a repo from the template. Note that you have to be signed into GitHub to generate the repo, so if you see this 404 error, sign in and try it again. Select the owner, then enter a repository name. I'll make it public so I don't have to configure GitHub authentication, and then click the Create Repository from Template button. And then after a few seconds, the new repository will be generated. Then we'll want to clone the repo locally and create a test branch. So copy the URL and then in a terminal window, run the git clone command. Change into the directory that was just created and run the command git checkout -b test. Next, we'll want to copy the Helm chart template into a folder with the name of your application. We'll copy the command, paste it here, and update it for the name of the application. Now we need to add, commit, and push these changes to our test branch. Next, we'll want to create a namespace in OpenShift that corresponds to our test branch. So we'll use the IGC command line interface. Note that you have to be logged in via the CLI to OpenShift. Change the namespace to match our test. And that will generate the project namespace. Then we'll want to execute this command to grant access to the service account in our test namespace to be able to pull a container image from the dev namespace. So copy this command, update it for our corresponding namespaces. And then finally, we'll want to repeat these steps for our other staging namespace. So I'll run git checkout, create a new branch called staging, So I don't have to copy the Helm chart templates to this branch because I created this branch from our test branch where we copied the Helm charts earlier. So they already exist here. I'll push this branch up to the remote repo. And then I'll use the ICT or IGC command to create the OpenShift ICT staging namespace. And then copy this command to grant access to our service account. Again, we want to grant it access to the ICT dev namespace where our container image is. And this is in our ICT staging namespace. Now we can hook our Tekton CI pipeline of our application to the Argo CD pipeline. To accomplish this, we will need to create a config map and a secret. This will enable our Tekton pipeline to notify the Argo CD pipeline when a build has completed. Before we do that, let's look at our existing pipeline. If we look at our last pipeline run, we'll notice that the last step, the GitOps step, was skipped. So this step is intended to notify the GitOps Argo pipeline when the build has completed. But since the secret and config map aren't there, it detects that it has not been configured, so it skips this step. So we will go back and configure that now. To create the secret and the config map, we will use the IGC GitOps command. We need the secret and the config map name to be created in the namespace where our Tekton CI pipeline executes. In my case, that's the ICT dev namespace. So we'll verify what namespace we're on with the OC project-q command. As you can see, we're on the ICT staging namespace because that's the last namespace we created. So we'll use the OC project command to switch to the dev namespace. And here we can generate the config map and secret with the IGC GitOps command. Provide our Git username, our personal access token, the branch that we want to use. So we will use test. So that's the branch that we will link in our GitOps repo with the Tekton CI pipeline build. Next, we will create an Argo CD project. While the Argo project is optional, we will create one to use to deploy our application to different namespaces. To create the Argo CD project, I'll use the Argo CD UI. So on my cluster, I'll click the applications and then click on the Argo CD to open up Argo CD in another tab. I'll log in via OpenShift. Then click on the gears icon to go to the settings, and then on projects, click the new project. In our project name, short description, and then add a source. The source will be the GitOps repo that we created earlier. So copy that URL and paste it here. And the destinations will be the cluster to deploy it to. So we're going to deploy it to the same cluster that we're running in. So we'll choose the in-cluster default. And then our namespace, we'll change that from default to the ICT test namespace that we created. And then we'll add an additional destination for our project for our staging that we created. So again, that'll be the same cluster that we're running in and ICT staging. And next, click the Create to create the project. Now that we have our project, we can create our Argo CD application. So again, back on the Argo CD UI, we'll go to Manage Applications, New Application. We'll give it a name. Based on the recommended name, we'll prefix it with our environment that we're going to deploy to. We'll call it Test, ICT, Microservice. We'll add it to our ICT microservice project. We'll change the sync policy to automatic so it'll run automatically. Next, we have to create our source repository URL. So again, that's our repository URL for our Git repo, our GitOps repo. For the test Argo CD application, we need to change this from the head or master branch in the GitOps repo to our test branch. And then the path is the path of our application. So the name of our application that we created in the GitOps repo. Now the destination that we want to deploy to is we want to deploy this to our in cluster. So basically the same cluster that our Argo CD is running in. And the namespace for test is the ICT test namespace in my instance. And then click Create. And the test application has been created. So now that we have our Argo CD application to deploy our app to test, let's create one for our staging environment. So click the New App, Staging, then App Name, create it as part of our project. Again, we'll make this automatic. The source URL is still the same, GitOps repo, but instead of head, we want to tie it to the staging branch. And the path to the Helm chart is still ICT microservice, the name of our application. The destination will be in cluster because we're still deploying to the same cluster. It's just that we're going to deploy it to the staging namespace. And then click Create. So now we have our Argo CD applications to deploy our microservice app to test and staging. So now that we have the Argo CD configured, let's see how the CI/CD process works. We will modify the code to trigger the Tekton CI build process, which will in turn trigger the Argo CD process to deploy our application to our test namespace. So let's modify our Hello World service to, instead of returning Hello World, we'll have it return Hello ICT for the IBM Cloud Toolkit. Save that. We will also need to change our corresponding tests so that we pass our tests to instead of checking for Hello World here, we'll check for the Hello ICT. So then we will add, commit, and push our changes to our remote repo. So you may have noticed that we're pushing our code to the master branch. This is just for convenience of the demo. In reality, you should be pushing it to a separate branch and creating a pull request to merge them into master. So with that code push, we should see our Tecton pipeline started. So here you can see that it is running. So we'll pause the video here and wait for this to complete. Now that the Tecton pipeline has completed successfully, let's look at our GitOps task. So now we can see that with the secret and the config map, it knew to trigger the GitOps process by updating and pushing changes to the test branch. Now on the Argo CD UI, it detected that change and it successfully synced the application to our test environment. So back on the developer perspective, on the topology view, so we can see that this is our dev branch, and we can test the changes here by executing the git hello, and that returned hello ICT. That was pushed by the Tecton pipeline. If we go to the test namespace and open that URL, we should see that it is now, the code has been pushed there as well. Hello ICT. So Argo CD detected the change to our test branch, which was made by our Tecton pipeline, and push the application to the test namespace. If we want to promote that to staging, we will go to our GitOps repo and create a pull request. So here's the change that was most recently committed. So click compare and pull request. But instead of comparing it and pushing it to main, we want to push it to staging. Update the title for the pull request. And then click the create pull request. And then I'm going to merge the pull request. Again, just for simplicity of the demo. In a real environment, there would be different people that would approve the pull request. And now with that pull request, if we go to the Argo UI, go back to our apps in the staging. So it can take up to 5 minutes for the Argo CD to detect the change. So I could either wait for that, or I could tell it to manually sync by clicking synchronize, and that'll manually kick off the process. And now you can see that it successfully synced the project to our staging namespace. So again, if we go back to our developer perspective, switch to staging, launch the application URL, and execute the hello endpoint, we'll see that it says hello ICT as well. You can also use GitOps to deploy changes to one environment that doesn't apply to another. For example, in staging, we might want to have more application pods running than in test or in dev. So for example, right now, we only have one pod running. But if we would want to have 2 pods running, back in our GitOps repo, go to the code, and then on the staging branch, in our application, edit the values YAML file, and we'll just edit it here directly in Git. Again, this is just for demonstration purposes only. You would typically have that, or edit and push this into a separate branch and merge it via pull request. So we'll define the name of our application, and then we want replica count 2. So if we commit this changes, and again we're going to commit it directly into the staging branch, which is what you wouldn't do in a real project. And now if we go back to our Argo CD, again in a few moments it should detect that change and push it automatically. I'm going to go ahead and manually kick off the sync process. So the syncing has started, and our pod is starting up. Now we have our 2 pods running, and if we go back to our perspective here, our developer perspective, you can see that it reflects the 2 pods running here as well. So back on the CD with Argo page, the next section discusses managing secrets in Argo CD. In addition to being able to manage applications with Argo CD and deploying them, you can also use Argo CD to push secrets. We will cover that in a separate video. And then the last section covered in this page is configuring Argo to push your application to a different cluster. So we won't cover that here. In a real project, you could possibly have multiple clusters, one for each environment, and you would definitely have a production cluster that's different than where you're running your Argo CD. But that step is documented here, but we will not go through it for this video. Thank you for watching.